In our last section, we discussed about the concept of living things, and we give some example of some living things, and we were able to describe the characteristics, what actually make a living thing a living thing. Okay, so we make reference to respiration, growth, reproduction, excretion, and those major factors very important for a living thing to portray. So today we're going to discuss the relationship between living things and non-living things. Okay, living things cannot do without non-living things because we need living things. We need non-living things to survive. So living things have to be in an environment for it to be able to explore the physical environment and be able to strive well in a particular habitat. Okay, you look at this picture. We have lion. Lion is a living thing. We have a bottle of water. A bottle of water is a non-living thing. So if you're thirsty, for example, we need water to survive. All right. So we're going to go through different aspects on how we living things tend to exploit or utilize non-living things for to be able to survive in a particular habitat. Okay, so the first thing is that plants depend on sunlight. So without sunlight, plant cannot thrive. All right. So during photosynthesis, photosynthesis normally occur during the day, and during the day, sunlight is very present. Okay, and you know that plants they are normally called producers. They manufacture their own food by themselves. So they utilize sunlight for them to be able to produce food. All right. So if you look at this picture, you can see we have the sunlight, we have the oxygen, I have the carbon dioxide and water. So during the day, during photosynthesis, oxygen is given out as a waste product out to the environment, while carbon dioxide is utilized into the cells of the plant. Okay, and water, you can see the water H2O is trapped from the soil, which is being absorbed through the root hairs to the stem and to other part of the plant where it's needed. All right. So I'm not here to explain the concept of photosynthesis, but just to give you an overview of how sunlight normally help plants to manufacture their own food. So sunlight is very important. We humans, we need sun. Okay. For example, you get your energy from the sun, and from the sun you get your vitamin D. All right. We use the sun for a lot of things. Sometimes we human beings, if we want to dry some farm produce, we depend on the sun for us to dry those farm produce. So human beings, we cannot do without the sun. Animals also you need the sun for them to strive. All right. So, for example, some animals that like place that is very warm, they depend on the sun. There are some animals that like place that is very cold. They go to a cold region. All right. So sunlight has a major impact it plays, and plants cannot do without sunlight. They need sunlight for them to be able to strive. All right. So this process is photosynthesis. So if you look at this picture, in my last lesson, I make reference to we take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide. So during photosynthesis, the reverse is the case. Plants take out oxygen and utilize carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. All right. So living things depend on water. We depend on water because we can't do without water. All right. So all animals drink water for them to become hydrated. Because if you don't drink water, your cells may desiccate and die. Because we need water for this for your soil for your cell to remain turgid. Okay. And when you're tasty, the first thing that comes to your mind is okay. I want to drink water. I want to quench my taste. So, for example, going to the desert without water, you're not going to survive because you become dehydrated. Okay, so water is very important to all organisms. We need the water to survive. So, water is a non-living thing, and we living things tend to depend on water to survive. For example, plants cannot do without water. If I take away all the water from this bottle, this plant will tend to wilt and die because the cells will dry up. The cell won't become turgid and the plant will not be able to absorb nutrients from the soil. So water is very important. All right. So air, we depend on air. Oxygen is a very important air that we utilize as a living thing. So you utilize air. So if you look at this oxygen circle here, you can see that from this plant, oxygen is given out during the day to the atmosphere. Plants, animals here, this animal tend to utilize the oxygen and inhale it for respiration. All right. And the plants and this animal give out carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide that is given out from the animal, the plants tend to utilize it for photosynthesis. Okay, so this is kind of the interrelationship between plants and animals. And the non-living thing in this picture here is sunlight. You can see the sunlight there, and you can see the oxygen. So the oxygen is a non-living thing, which is being what utilized for this oxygen cycle, whereby the animals or plants can tend to interact and benefit from that gas, which is very important gas in the atmosphere. And again, oxygen. If you want to burn a firewood, for example, you need oxygen. Oxygen is part of those things you need for combustion to take place. Combustion means burning, so you cannot do without oxygen because you need it for combustion. Okay, if you take oxygen out, you cannot actually burn a substance. So oxygen is very important for combustion. Okay, so the next one, soil. Soil is very important. Without soil, plant cannot stand firm to the ground. Okay, so plants depend wholly on soil. We human beings we work on top of the soil surface. All right, so soil have a lot of nutrients. There are a lot of nutrients present in the soil. So you look at this picture, we have calcium, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and sulfur. So all these are important elements which are present in the soil. So the soil utilizes all these elements and utilize all that type of nutrient that is in the soil for it to be able to trap it. So, for example, if this plant does not have any source of water, because you're not just having the nutrient alone, but you need water to dissolve these nutrients so that the roots can easily absorb it. So, for example, if there's no water present in the soil will become dried up. The plant cannot absorb it. Okay, because the soil needs something moist, it is water, so that you can easily dissolve these nutrients together, while the plant can easily what absorb it to the stem. Okay, so plants cannot do without the soil. Animals cannot do without the soil. There's some animals that feed on some organisms that's found on the soil. Like for example, like a worm. The habitat for worm is the soil. They stay inside the soil. So the animals that feed on those worms. So for example, if those worms are not present on the soil, how can an organism tend to strive? So a soil tend to serve as a habitat for some organisms, both plant origin and animal origin. Like for example, fungi. So fungi grow directly from the soil. So the soil is very, very important for living things. We can't do without the soil. Okay. So the next one, temperature tend to affect living things. Okay. So we can't do without the temperature. All right. And sometimes the temperature can have a very good effect on us. It can have a negative effect on us depending on the time of the year. So, for example, when the weather is very cold, people tend to wear heavy clothes and a very like a sweatshirt, so you can be able to cope the harsh condition of the weather. Okay, sometimes when the weather is very hot, people tend to drink water. You can pour water on your head so that you can feel the coldness of the water, because at that point in time you start feeling hot and you start sweating a lot. So we need a lot of things. Water is a non-living thing. Okay, look at it there now. You can see now the weather is very hot. Now we're depending on water, which is non-living thing for it to be able to cool our temperature for us to calm. Okay, so a lot of things. Temperature have different effects. For example, bacteria can grow, but bacteria depends on temperature for them to be able to strive very well. Understand? So for different things, for example, if you're in a room, if the temperature is very high, you cannot really sleep comfortably. If it's very cold, you need a blanket to cover yourself. But when the temperature is at room temperature, you can tend to strive and manage the temperature and be able to sleep properly. Okay, so temperature have different factors. So for plants, temperature affect plants. A good and moderate temperature can make a plant strive very well, but a very harsh temperature can make a plant to wilt. Okay, so plant can tend to wilt when the temperature is very high. This is very high, it is very cold. There's some plant that cannot strive during cold temperature, they tend to wilt. There's some plant that cannot strive in high temperature, they tend to wilt. Why there's some plant that strive, they need very harsh temperature for them to be able to survive. You go to the desert, you have some species of plants, for example, your cactus plants. So those plants have a lot of that are very moist. They have a lot of moisture, and they don't really they don't easily carry out evaporation. Okay, so transpiration also does not actually come out from the stems. So transpiration is highly reduced, so they can easily retain that moisture for a very long period of time. That's why these are what we call adaptive features of some species. That's why they prefer that kind of environment, like the desert and other dry region. Okay, some plants don't have that features for them to be able to survive at that point. That kind of harsh temperature, they'll tend to die. We human beings we're not made to be able to survive in that kind of environment. So we prefer a more controlled environment for us to be able to strive. So if we go to the desert, we don't have any means of or any means of water, the human being will tend to die. So temperature have a kind of effect on living things. Okay, so the other effects on between living things and non-living things, interrelationship and all that. So I just say I should just give you just a few of them, so I'm not going to bore you with a lot of information. Okay, so if there's other effects, you can actually put in the comment section. All right, where we can actually go through them and discuss them in the comment section. So these are just a few questions that you can just use to play with. Before I show you the few questions, let me just go through this slide. Now, the relationship between living and non-living things helps to. Now, the first thing is they maintain balance in nature, which is very important. And the next one, they support life on Earth. Because without non-living things, we cannot survive. Without oxygen, you won't survive. Without the sunlight, we cannot plants cannot manufacture their own food. So it helps to provide food and shelter, and it keep the ecosystem healthy. So we cannot do without non-living things. We need non-living things to strive. All right. So these are some questions you can just go through. All right. So the first one is, I would love if you can answer this question in the comment section. So what will happen to living things if there were no sunlight on Earth? So you can answer the question. Can plants survive without soil? Explain your answer. Why is water considered important to both plants and animals? Okay. Then the next one, if all the trees in a community were cut down, how will it affect living and non-living things? In this fourth question, the first thing that can come to your mind is desertification. So, for example, let me just throw a little, throw some more light on the fourth question. So, if you cut all the trees down, now you can see that a lot of erosion is going to take place because there will not be any tree to suck up the excess water from the soil. And again, in terms of shading, shade will not be able to you won't be able to get shade and shelter from the tree, so you can have a lot of wind blowing around. Okay, so there are a lot of things that would depend on tree for. And again, if you cut all the trees around, how can you get those natural resources from them, like wood for to make planks? Okay, how can you get fruits to eat? Understand? So these are just kind of points you can think about. So if you can, any question here you can answer, you can just put in the comment section. All right. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Okay. Because my aim here, like I said before, is to give my views and explain all topics in biology, which is very important for all levels of students. Okay. So I'm going to see you next time. Thank you.